Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. Today starts a very fun reading challenge in which I am going to be reading Booktuber's best books of 2022. This was inspired by Kayla over at Books and Lala. She's the first person I've seen do this before, and I religiously watch her video every year of when she does this, and I've been wanting to try it for the longest time. So 2023, I'm doing it. We're gonna read people's favorite books of 2022. I have a few little prompts or challenges that I've picked out for myself to kind of hone in on what I'm reading, because I watched so many people's best and worst books of 2022. I compiled a playlist, I'll have them linked below. But after watching all of those, I was left with hundreds and hundreds of books to pick from out of everyone's favorites, so I really had to narrow down which few I was going to read. So in order to do that, I have picked a few prompts that we're going to read with. The prompts are as follows. I'm going to read a book from the Booktuber that I have the most similar taste to. So after watching all of these videos, I analyzed who had the most 4 and 5 star books for me on their favorites list, and I am going to pick one of their books and read that. Then I wanted to read a book that was on someone's favorite list, but also on someone's least favorite list for 2022. Then I wanted to find someone who had 0 books that I have read on their favorites list. So if I hadn't read a single one that they mentioned, I wanted to pick one from their video and read it for this challenge. And I actually came across quite a few that I had never heard of, but I had to pick one, and we'll get into my picks as I read them, or maybe a little bit later on. We're just going over the prompts for now. Then I wanted to allow myself to pick a random book. This can be a book that showed up on anyone's TBR, the way they pitched it sounded interesting enough, or it's something that I already had on my TBR that I just haven't gotten to yet and I wanted to give it a shot. This is the random book prompt that I'm just allowing myself a little bit of free will in my pick. Then I wanted to pick a book from a new to me Booktuber. This is a video where I tend to come across new faces and get some new subscriptions of different channels. Am I saying anything? Am I speaking English? I have no clue. I wanted to pick a new to me Booktuber and read one of their favorites. Then I wanted to read the book that's on the most list. So after analyzing all of these videos, there's a book that has come across numerous times across many people's lists, and that is the book that I'm going to read, because if it's showing up on that many favorites list, then it's obviously going to be decent, right? We're gonna see. And lastly, I wanted to read one of Kayla's favorites, as she's the person that I found out about this challenge through, and she's also my favorite Booktuber. I have found that Kayla and I have similar taste. I read some of her favorites and also some of the books that I have loved she's hated, and vice versa. So I wanted to pick one of her favorite books of the year. I already have one selected for that one. I'm really excited about it. I've had it out from the library for a while with the intention of reading it based on her praise of it. So we're gonna get into that at a later date, but let's just get started. So to start this challenge off, I'm going to read the book that was on the most favorites list for the year, and that is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I was actually fairly surprised to see this on so many lists. It ended up on like 6 or 7 of the videos that I watched. Those 6 or 7 people obviously loved this book enough to include it on their favorites, and with 6 or 7 people recommending the same book for 2022 and it already being on my TBR, I had to pick this one up. I'm going to read this one first because I actually was able to get a skip the line loan from my library for the audiobook, and I've heard a lot of people recommend listening to the audiobook because Jeanette narrates it herself, so people have been recommending reading it and listening to the audio at the same time. Since I was able to get the audiobook, I figured that's where we're gonna start. So let's get started. Hello friends, so I'm coming at you with an update for I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. But first I wanted to mention who this is cross-referenced by, so I have my spreadsheet up. So it was on Meg's favorites list, it was on Throne of Pages favorites list, it was on Cindy's favorites list, This Story Ain't Over, Jenny, it was on her favorite list, and it was on Haley Hughes's favorite list. It was cross-referenced by 5 people out of the 20-ish that I analyzed, unless I'm like miscounting. So 5 people recommended this one and called it one of their favorite books of the year. So this was a good book to start with. I had to skip the library alone and I finished it last night. So you can kind of see all of my tabs there. I know there's a little b-roll clip of me annotating. The 4 colors that I did heavy topics, favorite quotes, surprising moments, and then moments that made me smile. The moments that made me smile were little like funny quotes or something that was positive to me. For example, she's talking about her relationship with Miranda Cosgrove when she was on iCarly, and one of the things that I tabbed as made me smile was my friendship with Miranda has been a source of camaraderie and emotional support. Miranda is different and special. We Skype twice a week without batting an eye, you know, and I just thought like their friendship was really nice because you just never know with like teenagers working on a TV show, like do they get along at all? And so it was really interesting to see that. There was a lot of surprising moments in this. To give a brief synopsis of this one, it obviously is a memoir autobiography of Jeanette McCurdy's life, particularly recounting the abuse and trauma she faced at the hands of her mother and as a child actress. So it starts early on in her life when she's really young and certain things her mom did, how she got into acting based on her mom really pushing her to do that. Then the passing of her mother, so it takes place in 2 segments. We have before her mom died and after her mom died, and then after her mom's passing, the deconstruction of basically what she thought her mom was and kind of going over her life and career. And it was really well done. I do not rate nonfiction. I feel like I can't really assign a rating to someone's memoir. I'm like, I can't be like, this was a 4-star memoir, your life wasn't a great story to read about. Like, that doesn't feel fair. But I will say the writing in this was really well done. I love how Jeanette McCurdy narrated the audiobook. It's very clear she's not like a typical audiobook narrator, because at times I was like, get a little monotone there, but it was really nice to hear a memoir read by the author in the audiobook format. The topics are very heavy. She deals with eating disorders and trauma and abuse and all sorts of things, cancer, etc. The book was still like enjoyable to read in that it was just really well crafted and I really enjoyed it. So like I'm not gonna rate it because it is a non-fiction piece, but I did enjoy it and I also would highly recommend it. So there's that. I have finished the first book of this challenge. So the next prompt I'm going to be fulfilling is the random book, and for that I have selected Finlay Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cosimano. This is cross recommended by Gavin and Kayla. It was on both of their favorites list. This is a cozy mystery following Finlay Donovan. So this is one that really caught my eye because it was on both of their lists. I didn't pick anything from Gavin. Gavin had a few that were similar across the board to some people, but I own a copy of Finlay Donovan and I have the audiobook out right now. I have another book on this list that I only have the audiobook for, and I figured that would be good for when I'm at work this week or when I'm traveling. So we're gonna read Finlay Donovan first, and I will let a booktuber who recommended this tell you what it's about.
Spot number 6 goes to Finlay Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cosimano. This was my introduction to lighter, cozy mysteries and kind of changed the trajectory of a lot of my reading. So shout out to the people who introduced me to this book in the first place and the reason that I read it. Gabby, Nakia, Mayana, and Katie. This was on all of their favorites books of last year and I enjoyed it so much, and I feel like it's getting a little overhyped now. As in, I know a lot of people pick it up and maybe they're expecting a different type of, it's really just fun, ridiculous, silly, and wacky as Finlay Donovan finds herself in a murder for hire scheme by accident. She's an author, she's pitching her book, and somebody overhears, thinks she's a hit woman, and offers to hire her. As Finlay is a recently single mother. She is desperate for money and considers taking the job. It is infuriating following Finley and the poor decisions she makes, but there's also just this fun sidekick situation. There is a love triangle. It again has my favorite trope of a woman just thrown into unfamiliar circumstances and just figuring it out. I definitely would not recommend it as the most sophisticated, shocking, highbrow mystery thriller out there, but I had such a good time, it had to end up on my list.
Hello. So we're on to the next book, and I remember what this was in terms of like which prompt it was. I don't remember if this was cross-referenced by somebody else, and I can't find it in my notes, but the book that I have started is The Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay. This was recommended by Kayla of Books and Lala. This was one of her favorite books of the year. And I also remember, I think, it was on Gabby's least favorites. And I will let Kayla tell you what this is about.
Number 2 spot, of course, is The Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay. This is, I think, my 5th Paul Tremblay. This one I can just take credit for loving myself. I knew I would love it. I knew it would be everything that I wanted, and it was. Though it's not for most people. I am very hesitant to even include it, and I feel like a disclaimer is needed that my favorites list should not be taken as a recommendation list. So all of you who I know are out there who are going to build a TBR based off of this, don't you dare say I recommended it. It shouldn't really be categorized as horror. The synopsis itself is kind of misleading. It's more of a general fiction story, and it's about an author, and you're reading his memoir. It's this kind of coming of age story, but it also spans multiple decades of this man's life. And he has this best friend in high school, and they start the Pallbearers Club together. The club's not really that much a part of the book, but throughout it, Mercy, is annotating Art Barbara, our main character, our author's life story, life experience. She's critiquing not only his memories, his opinion and perspective on her, but also his writing and his grammar. It's a very self-aware book. It's pretty pretentious, and I just had so much fun. I read this 4 times this year, twice physically, twice via audio. I would recommend it on audio because I think it's kind of easy to skip over her annotations or not read them until the end of a page, and the audiobook just does such a great job of inserting her commentary at the right place with just the right of tongue-in-cheek style. It's very overly angsty. It's kind of about nothing. You can just add it to my list of favorite books that have no plot. It's not really scary or supernatural, but Art Barbara is convinced that his friend is a supernatural creature, perhaps a vampire, and he's giving his evidence. As a reader, there's so many things to consider, and I just think the ending was so thoughtful and beautiful, and I love this so much.
I am thoroughly enjoying this. I say hesitantly. I'll be honest, I guess I just don't know how I feel about it. It's interesting. I don't know where it's going, and I think that's maybe what's got me intrigued with it. It's taken me a while to get through. I'm listening to it on audio primarily, but I think I am struggling to get through it because I tried to read Kiss Her Once for Me for Kayla's Besties Book Club buddy read, and I was not enjoying that, and that book put me in a bit of a slump, and I was like forcing myself to get through that, and I ended up DNFing it, but now I'm in a bit of a slump because of it, and I'm just like, oh, I don't want to read, but I'm also bored of my music, and I'm bored of my podcasts that I listen to, so I'm kind of like forcing myself through this. And it's not that this is uninteresting, like I think the characters in this are really interesting, and I'm really intrigued to see where things are gonna go. There's been a bit of like a sprinkling of some other things that could potentially be happening, but there's nothing really solid presented, and I just don't know where this is going. I'm about halfway through it. I have to finish it within the next like couple days, because actually the next day or so, because my audiobook is due. And I could read the library copy, but I also have other things that I have to physically read for this, so I'm trying to utilize my audio when I can. And I'm enjoying it, and I think it's really interesting to do a tandem of the physical and the audiobook because of the way it's annotated, just because there's certain things that are underlined that maybe Mercy is commenting on that are misplaced within the audiobook. Very hard to explain, but I don't want to keep going on and on and on about this. Just know that I'm reading this and I'll update you once I'm finished with it, but I haven't updated you, and it's been a very long time since we talked. It was a week ago when I was in New York, so that tells you how long it's been. I'm supposed to get this video up very soon and I am not anywhere close, so I'm gonna have to change my uploading schedule, but that doesn't matter to you because you're seeing this when you see this and you have no idea what the original plan was. The Pallbearers Club is what I'm currently reading. It's something I've been anticipating for a really long time because of how much Kayla has liked it and talked about it on her channel, and I just don't know what's going on with it. I don't know how I feel, so there's that. So remember when I said I was gonna finish it in like a day or so? Finished it in basically one sitting tonight. I only had 2.5 hours left of the audiobook and I think I just like sat and cranked it out. So I have finished the Pallbearers Club, and I don't agree with Gabby that this is one of the worst books I've ever, or the worst books of the year. I also don't agree with Kayla in that it's one of the best. For starters, in Kayla's video, I believe she said, like, I don't recommend this to everyone, and that is very easy to see why. This has an average 3.19 rating on Goodreads, which is fascinating. And I fit right in that. I'm gonna give it a 3. I wish I could tell you why. When I finished this, I was like, I don't know what I think. Did I like it? Did I not like it? I just felt like void of human emotion. It was very strange. I think it was interesting. I think the writing was really good. I really liked the writing of this. The characters were interesting. I guess this book makes me wonder what horror really is, because when I think of horror, I think of like Stephen King, like the It movies. It's the only reference to horror that I have or know or have experience with. So that's what I think of. And like this didn't feel like that to me. So I guess I like don't understand what horror really is yet, and I obviously will explore that genre more and like figure things out as I go. This didn't feel like a horror book to me. I believe Kayla described it in her Goodreads review as like, imagine you're watching an indie film and then like a few theaters down there's a vampire movie going on. Vampire movie? That's pretty accurate. I just don't really understand. I don't know how to feel, so I feel like settling on a 3-star. I'm glad I read it, and I really enjoyed how it was written, and I really enjoyed the formatting of it and some of the characters and kind of how they worked off of one another in the book. So it was interesting. I would agree that I don't think I would recommend this really widely. On to the next, because I can't fathom this little brain thinking anymore about this book. So now it's time to pick my next book, and I am going to pick Our Wives Under the Sea. So this fulfills the prompt of reading a book from a booktuber that had 0 books that I've read on their favorites. And that booktuber is Noelle Gallagher. I was watching her favorites video, not a single one. In fact, I haven't heard of most of the ones she mentioned in her video. I figured I would do this one out of her list because this was almost a winner for the book that was on the most list. So I'm glad My Mom Died had like 5 or 6. Our Wives Under the Sea and Babel both had 4. So when Our Wives Under the Sea came up on Noelle's list, and it was also another really popular one, and it was short, I decided to go with that. I have the audiobook for Our Wives Under the Sea. It's like 6 hours, so it'll take me about 3 to get through. I typically listen on 2 times speed. Sometimes it's an hour and a half. It really depends. Theo is playing with the blinds because he wants to look out the window, and he decides that when I'm filming a clip is the perfect time to do that. I'm gonna let Noelle tell you what this book is about, and then I'll update you once I've made a little progress in the book.
Next book that I absolutely loved this year was Wives Under the Sea. So the story of Wives Under the Sea, it's basically split into 2 timelines and 2 perspectives. One of the wives is at the bottom of the ocean in a sunken submarine, and that's kind of in the past. And then you have the kind of present day wife who's living at the, like, on land, and her experience when her wife comes home after being lost at sea for like 6 months. And so you're kind of getting tandem timelines, which I feel like actually like fed into each other very well. It didn't feel clunky. It didn't feel confusing. I just thought, number one, it was such a clever book. Like, I've never read a book like that before, and I really appreciated just the creativity that went into a concept like this. But number two, I really loved both of the women. Like, I think that both of them were very strong in very different ways, and it didn't feel repetitive, right? It wasn't like, oh, we're learning about the same relationship just through different heads, you know? It felt like you were getting very important information at the time you needed it from the character you needed it from, you know? So I thought it was excellent. And it's a really quick read. So if you've seen it around, I highly recommend. I just thought it was so, so good.
It's now Wednesday, January 18th, and today I finished Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. This follows a lesbian or sapphic couple, as one of them is like a marine biologist or does some sort of underwater science, and she has to go on an expedition in a submarine under the water. Something happens with her expedition, and then she returns home after a really long time, and her wife notices that something's not quite right with her. And it takes place kind of on two converging timelines of present day and then what happened in the past at the start of the expedition, and we see both wives' perspectives as things happen. I was having a hard time like figuring out what category this book would fit in. Apparently it's a horror book. I don't really know how I feel about the ending. I don't know that I really understand the ending. I think I'm still learning what I like in the horror genre, as I might have mentioned with the Pallbearers Club, and this is another one of those where I'm like, I don't know. But I will say the writing in this was phenomenal. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Every little moment was just really well crafted. It was fantastic. Apparently this author hasn't written fiction before, and they've only written nonfiction. So if this is their first fiction piece, fantastic work. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed this. It did drag at sometimes in the sense that I think it's intended to be rather slow paced. So if you're looking for a fast paced horror book, this is not your go-to. Neither was the Pallbearers Club. That one was also really slow. But this one was only like a 6-hour audiobook, but I still spent like 5 hours listening to it because it was narrated in a British voice. And when they have accents, I tend to take things slower and listen to things over again. And I spent a lot of time just processing this book, which was a little unusual for me, but I really did enjoy it, and I'm gonna give it 4 stars. So that completes that one. Now, it will come as no surprise if you saw my most anticipated releases for 2023 that I'm actually currently reading Spare. The audiobook for this is due to my library soon, and I want to get to this before then because I want to listen to the audiobook because he narrates it. So I'm doing a tandem read as both audio and physical with this one, meaning that I am once again putting the Booktuber favorites content on hold. I have decided what's going to be next though, so I guess I can tell you about that. So next up I will be reading Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. This was for the prompt of a new to me Booktuber. I believe this was on Nakia Hideaway's favorites. I saw Nakia on one of the Literally Dead Book Club live shows that's hosted by Kayla, and I remember I really enjoyed her opinion. It might have been House Across the Lake, and I really enjoyed like the way she spoke and her commentary and things like that. And when I was looking for Booktuber favorites of 2022, I actually stumbled across her video and I was like, oh my gosh, hello, the focus. I was like, oh my gosh, I recognize her from that video or that live show she did with Kayla. So I decided that I was going to pick up one of her favorites. This is one that I've been meaning to get to for a while. It's a middle grade. I believe it's about like a magic school. Not 100% sure, but I've seen a lot of people recommend this as a middle grade book. I typically don't venture into middle grade. I typically stick with adult and occasionally YA. I don't think I've read a middle grade in a very long time, so I'm excited to pick this up and give this one a try when the time comes, but I gotta finish Spare first, so it might be a couple days before you see you again, but until then, I'm gonna be reading Spare. I'm coming back at you with another update, but this time it is Saturday, January 28th. I was supposed to post this video today, and that was my rescheduling. I was supposed to post this like a week or two ago. I don't know what's been up with me. I've been like in a semi-reading slump in the sense that I just haven't really had the time or energy to focus on reading. It's not that I don't want to read, I do. It's just I haven't dedicated the time to it because I've been busy at work and like needed to focus, so I couldn't listen to an audiobook, which is what I typically do. and by the time I get home I've been so tired, so I've just been watching like Game of Thrones, and so it's just been a weird reading month for me. I think I'm gonna have to skip one of the prompts because I have a book for it, but I just don't know that I'm gonna physically read it, and I want to get this video up soon. I'll just have to make decisions as time goes on. This video isn't shaping up to be what I wanted it to be, but we'll be okay. I am reading Amari and the Night Brothers, and I am like 3/4 of the way through this. I'm almost done. I've really made a lot of the progress on it today. This morning I was like 10% in, and I've just been listening to the audiobook and reading it all day, which has ended up in me being this far in. My goal is to finish it today. And then I'm also reading Notes on an Execution. We'll talk about that in a little bit though, but I wanted to update on this one because I know it's been a minute since we've talked. I think I talked to you about this. See, that's the thing, is I don't even know where I'm at in this vlog. I haven't even like, oh my god, my life is just such a mess right now, and I can't explain it more than that. And like, I don't know why. It is the way it is, but we're taking it in stride. But regarding Amari and the Night Brothers, this is a middle grade fantasy about Amari. Her brother has gone missing, and a random package shows up on her doorstep one day, sent from her brother, recruiting her to this magic organization, and she has special powers. So we've kind of got a magic school in here, which is cool because I think that's one of my bingo prompts for the year. So I'll get to cross that off early, and I'm really enjoying it so far. It definitely has middle grade writing in it. This is one of the first middle grade books I've read, aside from this series that shall not be named. This is really one of the first middle grade books that I'm reading, and typically I stick to like adult and then the occasional YA. So the reason I haven't really gone into middle grade is because I'm like, if I'm still like iffy on YA, I'm not sure that I'm gonna like middle grade, but I am really enjoying this. It's got really cute characters and really interesting plot line, and I could see, you know, anyone of any age enjoying this. I think the plot line's gonna be interesting, and I think the reveals are gonna be good and something like I'm not expecting, so I'll keep you posted on that. But I just wanted to update and share how weird things are right now. I don't know, I think I just need to be a little nicer to myself, and like, I have all these things planned, but maybe just give myself a little grace. I don't know, my face is so itchy in this clip. Whenever I turn this camera on, my face of my head starts itching, and I'm so sorry about that. So I'm gonna stop this clip here so maybe my face will stop itching, and we'll talk to you once I finish. Okay? Okay. I finished it. I am going to give this 5 stars, and typically I don't rate middle grade. It's kind of up there with nonfiction in things that I don't rate. I don't rate middle grade because it's not my age range. Sometimes I can get into YA and like be objective and rate that and things like that, but typically with like middle grade, I'm like, oh, like this is not written for me. So like, do I feel okay rating it 3 stars? And like, no. But I do feel comfortable if I really enjoy a middle grade or some other book rating it 5 stars, because obviously that gives good publicity for the book and the author, and it's a good rating. So this one I'm gonna rate because it's a 5 star. I was pleasantly surprised by this. Typically, I've learned that the mysterious elements or the big reveals of a fantasy book in general have to be pretty good for me to enjoy it. And it's not in the same way that I can't see it coming. Does that make sense? Like with a mystery thriller, like if I can see it coming, I'm like, whatever. With a fantasy, you kind of can tell that things are going to work out in the end, especially like a middle grade one. Like obviously things are going to be okay, whatever. With a mystery thriller, the whole twists and reveals and all of that are a completely different story, because like you don't know who's gonna die in a mystery thriller, you don't know how they're gonna die, whatever the mystery there is. But at the end of a middle grade fantasy, you know things are gonna work out. But I enjoyed getting there. I enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed the plot of this one. I did like the reveal, and I thought it was interesting how things were kind of set up throughout the book for the reveal in the end. It was kind of something I had anticipated, but not to the extent that it was done. And I just think it was really well crafted and really enjoyable. So another 5 star. How many does that put me with, like, for this whole series that series? This isn't a series, this is just a video. But like, all of the books I've read for this video have been really successful, I think. But I'm just thoroughly impressed with like how many of these I'm really enjoying, because y'all got good taste. So now I'm going to read Notes on an Execution. I don't remember who this was recommended by, and I don't know why. Oh, yes, I do. I remember now. This was on Gabby's favorites. Gabby is the one I had the most in common with, I think, and or at least had like 2 or 3 across the board that I had in common with people. I never had more than like 2 or 3, which was kind of weird. Gabby was someone that I shared the most with, and this is a book I've seen recommended before. I'm pointing over there because it is over there. I'm like looking right at the cover right now. But this is a book that I had seen recommended by people before. It was one that had interested me, and I thought it was like a safe bet. So I'm gonna let Gabby tell you about Notes on an Execution, and the next time I see you, I'll be updating you. I have already started reading this one, but I'm no more than like a quarter of the way through it. So I'll kind of update you when I get halfway through it, let you know my thoughts and everything, but I'll let Gabby tell you what this is about, and then I'll share an update with you when it's time.
And so in this story, we're following this guy named Ansel, and he is a serial killer who is sitting on death row. And the thing that makes this story so unique is the fact that we're following from the perspective of 3 different women throughout his lives, and we're getting to hear about his story from the women in his life. And then we also do get little tidbits of like Ansel's point of view as he's sitting on death row in the present day, but then we learn about his childhood like through the eyes of his mother, and you know, we learn about his life in flashbacks through the women that were in his life.
Howdy pals, it's time to wrap up this Booktuber video. I just filmed my reading wrap up for the year. It's the 31st of January, it's snowing outside, it's cold, and I want to get on to my next books. So I finished Notes on an Execution. This follows our main character, who is a serial killer. He has been convicted, he is on death row, and we are living out his last day. And in alternating chapters, we also get perspectives of people that have been in his life or have been affected by these killings in some way, whether they are the detective, his mom, the relative of somebody he killed. Fascinating. These characters were all super interesting to read about. I said in my wrap up, so I'm going to kind of repeat myself a little bit here, but that video comes out after anyways. Parts of this were really slow, especially in the alternate chapters that weren't his. It was a little bit slow, it drug on a little bit, and I was like, okay, I'm ready for the next thing. So that was a little bit weird. His chapters were fascinating. They were also written in the second person, which I don't think I've ever like read so much second person. And it was just a really interesting book. It was written really well. I would say this is like a literary fiction piece. It definitely critiques the idea of executing someone a little bit, but that's like towards the end, right before he's about to die. He obviously dies, he's been executed. And it was just really interesting to see his last day and also all the other people. I don't know. It's like hard for me to pitch this because it's so interesting and there was a lot that went on and it's hard to kind of encapsulate it all, but just him, his last day, and then the effects of what's happened with his life, I guess. I don't know. But I really enjoyed this. I think I told you I gave it 4 stars. It was a win. Now, you may be thinking, Shelby, you haven't finished all of your prompts. You are correct, kind of. So I had originally set out this video to do like 6 or 7 books, I think it was. But with how long certain things have taken me, I don't have an audiobook for this last book that I had planned to read. I'll tell you about it here in a sec. And I'm still interested in it. I literally got a physical copy from Book of the Month that I'm hitting below the camera right now. I was really excited to read this. I was willing to read it physically, but with how long this has taken me, I'm ready to just move on to the next thing. And this is not something that's really up my alley right now. It's not something I'm gravitating towards, so I'm not going to spend the time reading it if it's not something I'm interested in. So this was the book that was supposed to be for my Was on a Booktuber's Best and a Booktuber's Worst of 2022 list. That is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This is still a book that I'm interested in. I obviously got it from Book of the Month. It was the book of the year for Book of the Month, so it's got this really pretty gold on it. I'm absolutely still interested in reading this, just not right now, and I think that's okay. So because this was supposed to be the one that was on the best and the worst, I was like, I'm gonna have an incomplete list. My prompts are not gonna be finished. The Pallbearers Club, which I read based off of Kayla's recommendation. It was on Kayla's favorites list. It was one of her favorites of the year. She doesn't recommend it widely, as you saw in the clip where she talks about it. This was also on Gabby's least favorites, so we're gonna count that because it was also on a best and a worst, and I'm just double dipping that book, and that's okay because it's my challenge and I can do what I want.
A win is a win. A win is a win. I don't care what y'all say. A win is a win.
Overall, this was incredibly successful. I didn't have any 2 or 1 stars, which I consider a win. Mostly 4s and 5s. Really enjoyed reading a lot of the things that I was reading, so that's a win from me. I will leave everyone's channel linked down below. You probably already know them, but I'll leave them linked down below in case you don't. All of these were super successful because I didn't rate any of them 2 or 1. So I don't know how to wrap up this video because it feels like a really weird ending, like I'm just done with the books that I was reading. I think that concludes everything. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Happy reading. Don't jump in there.